19th century, manifest destiny was a very popular idea for Americans. This was the belief that the expansion of the United States throughout the Americas was God's will. For this reason, when the United States colonized many territories, it was seen as completely justifiable to the Americans. Before 1845, Texas was a part of Mexico until it was annexed by the United States. This was the beginning of what historians call the greatest territorial expansion of the United States. President James K. Polk was in office at this time. He was a big fan of manifest destiny and wanted to further colonize the Southwest region. Because of this, a disagreement arose. Mexico claimed that the Texas border was given by the Nueces River, while the U.S. saw the Rio Grande River as the border. To settle this, President Polk sent American troops to the area between the Nueces and the Rio Grande. On April 25, 1846, the American and Mexican cavalries clashed, and on May 11, 1846, Polk wrote a message to Congress which explained his reasons for declaring war on May 13, 1846. This is called President Polk's Address to Congress. In this, he used the conflict as justification for the war. Many Mexicans today will argue that President Polk instigated a fight. Some U.S. history books ignore this and credit the cause of the war to manifest destiny. However, it is important to know that this was not the main cause. In the war message, President Polk argued that Mexico was at fault for their unwillingness to recognize the Rio Grande as the Texas border, and that the clash of the two cavalries was initiated by the Mexicans. President Polk also wrote that the U.S. wanted to repair relations by sending a man named John Slidell to Mexico. However, Mexico was not interested. Historians agree that President Polk found this as an outrageous thing for Mexico to do, but in fact, this was understandable. Historians recognize that Polk did not include the fact that he knew Mexico would not welcome John Slidell, and some view this as an attempt at provoking war. President Polk did not recognize that there were Mexicans living in the disputed territory. He considered it American property, even though this was not the agreement. This is shown in his message, which included, "Mexico has passed the boundary of the United States, has invaded our territory, and shed American blood upon the American soil." It is proven that he expected the war to be a quick and decisive victory for the U.S. This suggests that Polk and other Americans viewed Mexico as powerless and unable to defend themselves, and many historians do argue that this was the case. This is reflected in the way the war is taught in the Mexican school system. For example, other sources argue that this bloodshed was provoked by the Americans and not the Mexicans. In Mexico, many students know that Ulysses S Grant, a commander of the U.S. Army, stated that the American cavalry was sent to provoke a fight, but it was essential that Mexico should commence it. This is not widely known in American schools. Troops were sent to disputed territory, but many do not know that the purpose was to start a war. Also, in Mexico, the war is called the North American Invasion. This alone shows how Mexicans view the war. To them, it was provoked by the U.S., but many Americans see it as a fair fight when in fact, it was not. When the war began, the United States viewed themselves as the victim, but Mexico interprets the start of the war differently. It is clear that perspectives differ to this day, but it is important to go into depth when studying history so that not only one side of the story is understood. There are misunderstandings that sometimes cannot be prevented, but understanding these differences can change the way that students think when learning about the Mexican-American War or the North American Invasion.